you're from California or not LA maybe, and maybe don't know all of the people that are up here. So welcome. This is the Women of Color for Justice. Actually, I renamed this. Sorry, you guys will be okay with it.
We'll find out.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's see.
Will you be
I
okay?
reserve judgment, let's see.
Oh no, I'm afraid. Okay, shoot. The women, all I did was add of color, because that felt
I'm down that.
Women of Color for Justice and Care First agenda. This is coming obviously out of the city of Los Angeles, where we are. So welcome, thank you for being here. This is going to be a great conversation today. I want to say thank you to, we're recording.
Hello.
I'll say thank you to Change Philanthropy for hosting this conversation and putting this conference on. Also, thank you to our co-sponsors for their vision for this session. The session is co-sponsored by the John M. Lloyd Foundation. Where's Emily? There she is. The Race, Gender, and Human Rights Fund.
Yay!
And the California Criminal Justice Funders Group.
Yay!
All right, so why are we here today? Just a little overview for our flow today. Basically, LA is awesome. We're gonna tell you about some great things that we've been doing. So, advocates in LA have achieved remarkable success, particularly in defeating the $3.5 billion expansion of jails and establishing the county's Care First Jails Last plan, which is focused on alternatives to incarceration. Our speakers will share insights on this campaign and how funders can help ensure resources for the talent and community that are driving framework like a Care First agenda that is being implemented, and how that is being implemented. Today, you're going to hear from how investing in organizing has resulted in power building and value-driven Femme leadership in LA County, with a growing inside and outside strategy to achieve deep transformation in LA's criminal legal system and to advance a safer, more equitable society. This is all basically about the importance of funding the unsexy. We talked about this, right, Christine? We've talked about this. Of funding the unsexy, which is the best way to describe it, but essential needs that philanthropy can support. So I think the term generational support has been going on at this conference. So thinking about what that generational support looks like. That would be long-term, multi-year support for infrastructure in the community, funding intersectional coalition building, power building, general operating grants, and unapologetically doing this for underrepresented leadership and talent like Femmes and folks of color who've been leading the way here in LA and many other places across the country. We are going to dig into this dialogue. We will also have Q&A, so please hold on to your questions because we'll ask them. And then we will also have some closing thoughts at the end of this panel. If you really have like a big question or something that you like, raise your hand or make eye contact with me and see if it works, and we'll try to dig it in. Also, I encourage crowd participation. I think we would all love to be able to hear how folks in the room are hearing what we're saying, or if there are questions, or if you're agreeing. So you might have already seen Supervisor Mitchell do her ASL applause. You're welcome to applause like that. You can also clap your hands if you want to, or snap, or just be like, woo! I love that. So. All right, vibe check for who's in the room. We're gonna see where everyone is from. We're gonna start here in California. If you are from California, working in California, please raise your hand. Oh my God. Georgia.
I'm actually from California.
Right. That's okay, that's California love in the room today. Does anybody also fund outside of California? Yes, so raise your hands if you fund outside of California. Great. Who are you with?
With the Heising Simons Foundation, and
Lovely.
we fund California, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas.
Awesome. And you are with?
I am with Willow Fund, formerly Grown Giving. So it's one donor. The foundation is one donor. She lives in California. I live in Seattle. She funds nationwide.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, folks. Next, who am I that's been talking for a while? My name is Molly, she, her pronouns. I am the Deputy Director for the California Donor Table, or CDT. Who's the Donor Table? CDT is the oldest donor network in the country that invests in political power and civic engagement across all tax statuses. including 501c3s, C4s, and PACs, while mainly centering racial justice. We believe in achieving systems change in a state like California requires sustained and diversified funding year-round. Our family of multiple tax statuses allows us to power the widest range of progressive and BIPOC power building efforts possible. We do that by working with funder allies, like you all, to help align impact for investments, as well as providing technical assistance to funders and organizers alike to be legally sound in what is an incredibly complicated state. For almost 20 years, we've been doing this across these tax statuses, building up C3, C4 tables. My friend over here that I've referred to in Georgia is the Georgia Donor Table Director. There are 38 donor tables across the country. Sometimes people know about that, sometimes they don't. I love to also point out that part of why our donor table started was to combat what's been happening on the right for a really long time is they have their own whole movement in donor tables, and they've been investing generationally, consistently for a really long time. So we try to break that. So Georgia, for example, you all have one table that you look towards to support. We in California, being that we are so large, have many different C3 and C4 tables that are regionally that we look to be able to guide us on who folks should be supporting, what needs support, et cetera. So we support those C3, C4 tables, and then also supporting the incubation of sort of infrastructure and those public utilities, we like to refer to them as, that help on-ramp talent, including candidates and staff that govern afterwards, to be able to make the things make sense, right? So that would be communications hubs, pipeline network, progressive governance organizations, and then also, we're not seeing this in many states, but here in California, trying to figure out how to combat recalls. So standing up support around that kind of thing as well. These arms have been able to help grassroots organizations, but also be able to elect amazing leaders throughout LA, San Diego, Orange County, the Inland Empire, Central Valley, the Bay Area, and in LA. One person who's missing today, but we're very happy to be able to support Councilmember Eunisses, Hernandez, many supporters in this room, I think, I hope. She's in DC doing big things, but also to support Supervisor Holly Mitchell when she ran for Board of Supervisors. Just being able to bring in amazing talent and folks that really move by their values, so we can help continue to create that along the rest of the regions and the communities that we work in. So, next question, since I just talked about all those different tax status things, and we're gonna get into talking about things that need to be funded, what do you all fund? Do you fund C3 work? Raise your hand. Yes, awesome. Do you fund C4 work? Oh, lovely. What a good group. Does anybody fund PAC or 527 work? Super. So hopefully that helps everybody with a little context who we're talking to, what we can talk about. You know, let's let the guards down. Here we go. All right, panelist intros. I have amazing people sitting next to me. I'm gonna start. I'm just gonna go in order so I don't get confused. But Ivette, we're gonna start with you. This is Ivette Alé-Ferlito, they, them pronouns. Ivette is a queer, formerly undocumented person and survivor of violence who was raised with an incarcerated parent. They are a co-founder and executive director of Defensa. And Ivette helped to found and lead multiple coalitions, including JusticeLA and Reimagine LA. Thank you for being here. All right, right next to me is Janet Asante. I'm gonna do this like you all are boxers. Janet Asante is an abolitionist feminist organizer at Dignity and Power Now and leads media and communications for the JusticeLA Coalition, also known as JLA. As the JusticeLA media coordinator, Janet previously worked to exonerate incarcerated people with the Texas Innocence Project. All right. Down at the end, we have Supervisor Holly Mitchell. Supervisor Mitchell serves on the LA County Board of Supervisors representing District 2, where she prioritizes poverty alleviation and anchored an equitable recovery plan from the health and economic impacts of COVID-19. She's also a former state senator who was the courageous North Star for many of us as the budget committee chair. That was your title, right? As the budget committee chair who held California accountable to its values. So thanks for being here, Supervisor Mitchell. Last but not least, Bambi Salcedo. Bambi is the president and CEO of Trans-Latina Coalition, a nationally recognized organization that advocates for and addresses issues of transgender Latinas throughout the U.S. She previously developed the Center for Violence Prevention and Transgender Wellness in Los Angeles. Thanks for being here, Bambi. All right, folks, so just opening up, this question is for everyone. Would love for you all to share 2 keywords or phrases that you would want the audience to come away from this session in considering investment in Femme leadership. Who would like to start?
I'll jump in. Words are hard, I'm gonna stick with phrases. So, if we're committed to creating a world that centers care over punishment, then we have to invest in the most vulnerable, including those who are doing the caregiving, who are often femmes, women, trans folks, gender non-conforming folks. And it's not gonna happen overnight, but with the right investment and sustained long-term investment, we're gonna make it happen.
Yeah, I will actually second that. The first word that came to my mind was sustainability. That sustained long-term investment is sorely needed because there's a lot of infrastructure pieces that we're missing and a lot of power building pieces that we need to uphold, so, yeah.
My word is etched on my forearm, and it's courage. Because I have found, as an elected policymaker, that I often have to not only reach down in some of my own courage, but it's tattooed on my forearm so I can remind others, frankly, about the power and the freeing experience of individual courage and the power and freeing experience of collective courage.
Bueno, primero que nada, yo quiero dar gracias a mi poder superior por darme la oportunidad de estar aquí con ustedes. Quiero honrar la tierra en la cual estamos aquí hoy en día y quiero también honrar su presencia. For those of you who were not able to understand, I always honor my Creator, my higher power, for giving me the opportunity to breathe one more day. I honor the land where we're standing on today, and I certainly honor your beautiful and amazing presence. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, right? You could have been doing many other things, right? Exploring the city, whatever, but you choose to be here, and I personally truly appreciate that. What I guess phrases also, because I can't really
say what you would like.
Yeah, I think what I would want for people to take really is for all of us to really understand the power that we hold, right? And how we are able to use our power and truly understand, you know, what is it that needs to be done, right? To eradicate the gauging of our peoples, right? I think we have to understand that the carceral system is a money-making machine, and they make money off our bodies. And so we need to make sure that we do whatever we can to ensure that our people are cared for instead of being caged and made money off.
Great, thank you, everyone. So advocates and electeds in LA have moved mountains in redirecting the county's focus from jail expansion to a care first agenda. And you will hear more about this and this huge success story shortly, but first we'd like to just lay the groundwork for digging into the history. So Bambi, you've been organizing at the intersection of gender justice and abolition in LA for decades. Can you take us back 8 to 10 years ago and tell us about what was happening in LA, what the context was?
Yeah, so specifically about that, I think it's important for us to recognize also that the carceral work that has happened has been happening for many years, even before this, county jail expansion project started, right? And I myself have been doing community work for over 25 years, here in Los Angeles specifically, and everywhere, but I'm here, LA is home. But yeah, I want to say about 10 years, that's when, this work specifically started. Like, people started organizing specifically around the investment that the previous board of supervisors did when they signed a contract with the development company to build a new jail. And that money, it was $3.5 billion that we wanted to invest into building this jail. And so obviously, many of us here organized around to make sure that money, $3.5 billion, or it was 3.8, right?
Well, 3.5 when we take a look at the fact that it was loans. So the county would have to go into debt to build a women's jail out in Lancaster and a mental health jail downtown.
Yeah.
So when you calculate the interest on those loans, it was over $3 billion.
Yeah, and so that's how we organized, and that's how actually JusticeLA was formed. And the Transnational Coalition was part of the core group, along with, it was Igniting Power Now, who basically were the fiscal sponsor for that coalition. And there were 8 core group, or there was 8 organizations that were like the core of the leadership of this campaign. And I mean, it was a long fight, but nonetheless we won, right? Like, we made sure that we pushed the Board of Supervisors to cancel the contract. And as a result, there was a committee that was formed, which was the Alternatives to Incarceration, in which many organizations around the county participated and developed a report with over
114.
Yeah, over 100 recommendations on how we wanted for the county, instead of putting the money to build new jails, to invest in people. And so from that, then we, some of the same group of people, we also organized to make sure that we put a ballot measure for people to vote to pass Measure J, which, obviously, police organizations.
Can you say more about what Measure J is?
Oh, yes. Well, Measure J it's J for Justice, but it was a ballot measure that we introduced, and voters here in Los Angeles voted to ensure that at least 10% of the unrestricted funding from the budget of the county was allocated for care rather than, again, incarceration. Yes. And so, so this is an effort that has been going on for many years, and we're still fighting to make sure that we close the county jail. Just add anything you want to add.
I mean, I think a few key, and thank you, Mammy, for giving synopsis.
Yeah.
A synopsis of such a rich history in the jail fight. And I think it's important to ground ourselves in the context of Femme leadership on a few key things. The first is that the organizing to stop jail expansion began with mothers who had lost their loved ones inside of the jails. It began with sisters and daughters, with grandmothers who formed the Coalition to End Sheriff Violence, because we were seeing here in Los Angeles so much violence both inside and outside of the jails. And it was women that were at the forefront. It was women-led organizations and women-founded organizations who really mobilized around the jail fight. It was a small family foundation, John M. Lloyd Foundation, which was for a long time the only funder for the jail fight here in Los Angeles for years. There was no money. It was just literally small grassroots organizations and families at the forefront stalling the process. And we stalled the process by looking at the intersectionality of the jail fight. Because jail expansion was a gender justice issue, the county was gonna build a women's jail on toxic soil where people were dying of an incurable disease out in Lancaster. So it's an environmental justice issue. It was a gender justice issue because those women that would be incarcerated in the women's jail in the new jail would have been 80 miles away from their families with no visitation, no access to their children, exposed to toxicity. It was also, of course, a racial justice issue because we know who's being extracted from our communities to go into these jails. So there were so many layers. It was a public health issue. And we were able to tap into that intersectionality. We organized ER doctors to come into the Board of Supervisors meetings in their whites. We organized students in the surrounding universities to call into the Board of Supervisors to join us in actions. We mobilized artists to create jail beds that we delivered to the Board of Supervisors on the day that we launched the new campaign. Because for a long time, the campaign was LA No More Jails. Very small coalition, no funding. And so it was women like Diana Zuniga and Patrice Cullors who moved funders to make major investments into the jail fight. And that's when everything changed. We decided to expand the breadth of the organizations and the base that we were building in order to move the supervisors. We suddenly had an influx of resources that we could re-grant to organizations to do the work, because many folks were just not getting paid to do the work. We just believe in it because it was directly impacting us, right? And so we also recognized that an outside strategy was not everything. We needed to build an inside strategy. We needed to get to know the department heads, know what's important to them, really understand the budget, really understand the policy work, and thank God for the Women's Foundation of California that many of us were able to attend and get trained on local and statewide policy. We began understanding how the state policy influences the local policy and vice versa. And so being able to hone in our skills, expand our base, expand our reach inside the county, build those relationships, that was what propelled us forward, and women were at the helm of all of it. And so it's important that we understand that relational organizing strategy, it came from Femme leadership. The funder relations, it came from Femme leadership. And the building of the base with other women, it came from Femme leadership, right? And so while JusticeLA has been a multiracial coalition of many genders, I think it's important to understand that those that have been at the helm of this organizing have been femmes, have been women, have been gender non-conforming folks, have been gender non-conforming young people. When we look at YJC, girls who were at the forefront, YJC, the Immigrant Youth Coalition, who was one of the founding leaders of JusticeLA at the time. So it's really important to understand the full context of how we got there. And like Bambi mentioned, we not only stopped the jails from being built, we moved the county to adopt the Alternatives to Incarceration vision. Now they call Care First, Jails Last. Care First was our slogan. It was on curb t-shirts back in, what was it, 2015 on our curb t-shirts, right? It was our community slogan, but we said it so loud. We said it for so long that it suddenly became the rhetoric of the county, right? And so, yes, it's appropriating our work and our language, and sometimes to justify things that we don't agree with, but now they are saying the things that we've been saying for years, and it took a very long time to get there, but we managed to get there.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate that commitment to setting the narrative, even if it was appropriated. Janet, you are an up-and-coming leader in this work. Do these tales of the early days resonate with today's work?
Absolutely. And I think what's really important to name is all of that people power that brought us to reach those wins. And that people power, as our words were before, it needs to be sustained, and that sustenance comes from femmes. It comes from the same groups of people, like mothers, like sisters, like wives and girlfriends and partners, who come to us and say, you know, my loved one is not receiving health care inside, or my loved one is on the outside and I'm not able to get any mental health care for them. You know, just last week, a mother asked, you know, should I wait until he gets picked up on another charge and goes to jail? Maybe he'll receive care there. And that's where we organize from, and I know that that's a very big motivator for me, is the families that come to us. And unfortunately, due to the lack of infrastructure and resources for Care First in our county, those stories will continue to grow. And so that resonates very strongly with me, absolutely, as we continue this fight with JusticeLA, and we have, you know, a growing number of deaths inside of our jails, and families who come to us and say, what can we do so that this doesn't happen to someone else like it happened to me?
This next question is for the three of you, Janet, Ivette, and Bambi. We'd love to hear about some of the success stories. Ivette, Bambi, Janet, please tell us the first big battle and where did that lead?
The first big battle was when we canceled the women's jail. So remember, we had 2 jails to cancel, a women's jail and a mental health jail. And it was the women's jail that got canceled first. And so that was a huge victory. Once we got that win, we're like, hell yeah, like we can do anything. But at the same time, in the same breath, the county said, oh, we're not gonna build a mental health jail, we're gonna build a mental health hospital. But we're calling it a hospital, but it's still gonna be run by the sheriff. So y'all cool with that? And we're like, no, it's still a jail. If it's run by the sheriffs, it's mandatory detention. If it's not in a clinical setting in the community, that's not what we want. And so that first battle became the second battle that we were facing.
Do you want to go? So I think before I ask your question, I think it's important for us to understand and recognize that, as Yvette mentioned earlier, right, like that we, you know, femmes, right, we have been caring for our own people for a long time with our resources, right? We have housed our people, we have fed our people, we have clothed our people with no resources. And so that's also important for us to understand, because it's part of the history, right? Like we know that the resources are there, right? And so we should tap into those resources. And that's how we started to learning this budget process and all of these things that we needed to learn. And that's how we also learned that obviously passing legislation, such as Measure J, will help us ensure that, you know, those resources are allocated and that they are, you know, that they don't continue to give us a runaround, right? But I guess, I mean, over time, you know, there have been many victories, you know, for me that I have witnessed, but being part of this work it's definitely rewarding, you know, just seeing time and time again, you know, like, you know, closing or actually canceling the contract, right? Like the passage of Measure J, the report for the alternatives to incarceration, you know, the resources there are now allocated to our community, even though it's not the amount of money that we analyze should be allocated, because in our own analysis, we came up with close to $1 billion to be allocated for our communities, and, you know, we're only getting like a third of that so far. And so, I mean, all of those are certainly wins that, you know, we're seeing that our community are bettering even a little bit, even if we're not where we need to be, but, you know, we're little by little, we're like a step ahead.
Yeah, I would absolutely say these are major successes. I know that the panelists next to me are talking about these things like, you know, they're just regular everyday. Oh yeah, absolutely. We were able to get the county to do an alternatives to incarceration work group, like in the county, or I'm at Central Jail Closure Work Group in the county that produced a report on how to close a jail in 18 to 24 months. Like, this is incredible work, and these are major successes that we are continuing to benefit from in terms of funding demands from the county, in terms of funding demands from funders like yourself, in terms of just really having a roadmap to communicate to other folks. Just, you know, everyday folks as we're base building, having these roadmaps is a major, major success. And yeah, super grateful for all of the organizers that came before me. And also just from my background being from Texas originally, what a stark contrast to the real power and transformative change that has come from organizing here.
This is somewhat off topic, but, well, it's not off topic, it's not on my sheet. How much are you guys in communication with folks that are trying to do this in other places? Like, are you able to share this?
Detroit had a big jail victory.
Yeah, Atlanta, Louisiana, in New York. I mean, there were jail fights going on across the country when LA was in its jail fight, like in the peak of the jail fight. And so we were in communication with folks all over the country, and we're still in communication with folks because we might all be maybe in different places. Like, some folks have canceled contracts, some folks are redesigning. I know in Atlanta we would have meetings with folks in Atlanta who were looking at, you know, what to do with their old jail facilities and you know, what their design process was looking like. And we're not there yet with closing MCJ. We hope to be there very soon. And I want to get to where Atlanta was, to be really thinking about, like, how do we transform this center of harm and punishment into something beautiful?
Christine, would you like to say something?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christine Wyatt, Georgia Alliance for Progress. So as you talk about jail closings in Atlanta, of course, many of you here know that Atlanta is facing the fight of its life to stop Cop City and 381-acre plan to spend $60 million on the largest training facility, militarization facility in the country. And they have, it's so hard to talk about, but I'm really encouraged by this conversation because we've had multiple roadblocks, so many challenges funding the work. We were able to accomplish the first, our first win, which is getting all of the signatures to put a referendum on the ballot, which we don't really do in Georgia, but we do at the local level. And now the referendum is going to show up on the presidential primary, which is okay, except for Biden's only one on the primary, so it'll really be the Republicans trying. So anyway, so my question is, we have a binary primary anyway. But my question is, how can we, like, what would your advice be to the organizers who are planning the second phase of organizing in preparation for this ballot initiative, as we sort of organize with all of the threats of terror from the police who've already shot and killed one force defender, and are really doing everything they can to lock up and find charges around the folks who are doing this organizing?
Well, first of all, the work that's happening in Atlanta, like, the organizers there are on the front lines of what we're all trying to achieve nationally, right? We're looking to them as much as they're looking to other folks across the country. So I just want to name that. There's just such deep respect. But I would say one of the big lessons that we learned during the jail fight really came in the context of us losing. So the Board of Supervisors had already...
I wasn't there.
You weren't there.
And I'll say my piece in a minute.
The supervisors, not Holly Mitchell, the previous board, they had already approved the contracts. They had been signed. There was environmental review that showed that the soil was toxic to build a women's jail there. And they're like, oh, well, that's cool, we're still gonna sign it. They had already started paying the construction company. So everyone told us, y'all already lost, like, why do you keep going, right? And this is the context of the referendum. Is it referendum? Yeah. In the context of the referendum, they might lose the referendum, but what's important to know is that a loss isn't always a loss. A loss isn't always a loss, because we were told that we lost. And we're like, no, we're gonna keep going. We still haven't won yet. So we're just gonna keep going until we win. And so the power of persistence, sometimes it's a delay strategy, which it was for many years until we got sufficient funding. It was just a delay strategy. Folks would shut down the board of supervisors, just go in and protest and shut it down. Like, that's all they could do. They didn't have the relationships inside to move them. We didn't have the base to do the things that we wanted to do. But folks kept going, even if it was just a small group. So that persistence piece, and to really remember that if it's a loss, it's not the end of it. It's not the end of it.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Can I add a little bit to that?
You got time, go ahead, you have something to say?
Do you wanna go?
No, you go, and I'll go after you.
Okay. So, I mean, I think for those of you who hold the purse, right, I think, it's important that we also invest in contra messaging, right? Like in the actual campaign, right? Because, you know, media influences the way people think, the way people act, right? And we need money to do our campaigns, right? And so they are well funded, right? Like they're funded by police associations and unions, you name it, right? And also like they're funded by like extremist people, right? And so that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that we actually provide the resources, because we know how to organize. We know how to do what we need to do. But it's really hard when you don't have the resources, right? Like, and we know that money is power. And so, so that's one of the things that I want to encourage for us to actually think about.
Can you briefly say what kind of money you need, C3 money, to be able to do the organizing?
Well, I mean, yes, like for us, yes, but for many of us, right? Like, I mean, you know, I remember like when Dignity and Power now was the fiscal sponsor for JusticeLA, right? It is a C3, right? But I also want to say that for us as an organization, you know, what we're doing is that we're also, you know, we're in the process of applying for a C4, because we want to make sure that, yes. And so stay tuned. We are going to endorse people, and we're going to, you know, do all the things that we need to do to make sure that people who hold the same values are in office for our people.
I just want to piggyback on the loss piece, because I think that is so important and we miss it. And what you didn't hear them say, maybe you don't fully appreciate the power and influence you had. When I walked down the hallway leading to the boardroom, on both sides there are these portraits of the members of the LA County Board of Supervisors. And for the longest history, it was all white men. And so, you know, you and your organizing helped change the culture in which elected officials could elevate and choose to run or not, be perceived as viable or not. To flip that, for that board to make a different decision was profound, but it also created space and opportunity for a different kind of leader to be perceived as viable and electable to the most powerful elected body in the country. And that's what the LA County Board of Supervisors is. Why? Because our founding charter said there will be 5. And the founding fathers, that's what it was, never imagined that we would be a county of close to 11 million. So when you define power in elected bodies, it's how many people you serve. And so because there are 5 of us, we serve 2 million. There is no other elected body, and only 5 or 6 other governors, Newsom being one of them, who represent more people. So when you recognize fully the power of this elected body, and for an elected body to change its position, and for the foreseeable future, its culture and its constitution be changed. That's something that you may not measure, but it's powerful and significant. Whew. Think about that. You know, it gives me great pride personally when I hear you talk about the Women's Foundation. I know it was almost 24 years ago because I was home on family leave when I was asked to come and sit around a table with my baby on my shoulder to envision the Women's Policy Institute. And the reason I was at the table is because I have played inside-outside baseball my whole career. I've been an advocate, then I got mad and ran for office. And you know, so that's my orientation. I'm an activist policymaker. And I knew that there were, at that time, health foundations in California had emerged and powerful. So we were good on health access because the foundations were funding them, but nothing really else, right? Really nothing else. And so looking for and trying to grow that crop of diverse advocates who understood the process. I am process fixated because it's the process that screws us most times. That's why I chair budget committee. And so then I've been on the Women's Foundation board for many years, and I was also at the design table, and I hope many of you who are funders know about or have participated or will be interested in doing so, the Women's Foundation's Philanthropy Policy Institute, which I've spoken at, helped Serena design, again, to look at this group and the role we needed to make sure you all understood the role you can and should play, in my humble opinion, in the policymaking arena, and to understand the process and to have relationships. The same thing for the women who went through the training program. And that's how, on a cellular level, we are able to shift the orientation of these elected bodies by bringing perceived outsiders into the fold with access and information and power.
The word pipeline continues to come to my mind when I think about everyone and everything that you all have done and how you brought each other up. So just want to note that. Also, back to you, Supervisor Mitchell, to share a little more on your perspective of effective advocacy as an elected and how electeds and advocates work together on inside-outside strategies, as well as any insights on differences in working at the state versus the county levels.
As my new colleague, Supervisor Horvath says, oh, all the things, I have all the things going on in my mind right now. And you know, John Matthews on my staff has heard me say this. You know, it is a relationship that evolves and changes as it should, as new players come into the mix, as new challenges present themselves. And I'll be the first one to say sometimes I am frustrated with my advocate allies, who sometimes I feel are like, you're missing the mark. That's not the main thing. We all over here talking about this. This is the main thing. I have often been frustrated with my elected colleagues who miss the mark and sometimes get caught up when we advocates are putting the pressure on them and then get convenient amnesia, as my mother would say, real fast. I think I felt that coming to the board in the middle of COVID, coming off of a 10-year, really successful, if I might say, career in the state legislature, where we were able to facilitate culture shift. We talked about language and got money to help the media kind of reframe and use different words. I think about the bill I carried when the media would call victims of sex trafficking, you know, prostitutes, It was like, you can't be a prostitute because you can't consent to sex under 18, so stop saying that word. So I agree with you, the language is so important to help change. And so I come off of 10 years, I carried the bill to create parity in crack and powder cocaine sentencing, just a number of bills. Me and Ricardo Lara's package, where we right-size the juvenile justice system in California, just kind of riding high. And I come to the board, very excited to join the board that is progressive, had done these things, on the cusp of making some really powerful decisions, and it's COVID. So we're not meeting in person, you all can't access them, and I get here and it's a little different. Like, oh, I thought we was about to shut down and do some things.
We do too.
Yeah. And it's different. I'm like, who'd have thunk it, right? But it was different. Then we had a sheriff who is mentally ill, that took, all the air kind of out of the room and created a distraction, and we fell for it. And so I'm sitting there trying to put it all together. Then I'm new to the county. I watched this work from afar because I was in the state convincing governors to close state prisons and to try to close the shoe. I'm doing state work, so I watched this stuff, read about it, I'm an Angelino, but I don't have the local relationship. So I'm like, where are the people, John? So I was out of sorts, deeply out of sorts, and concerned about, like, what does this mean here in Los Angeles? And so you get your sea legs. I go about hiring the best and brightest I can in these areas that are important to me, and we begin to make some traction. There was a report back motion to tell us what we could do with the sheriff, and then folks didn't want to make a move, so it took us a year to get that measure on the ballot. So in the event we ever find ourselves or we have elected another mentally ill sheriff, we have the process to deal with that, right? And so the past 3.5 years we've made progress, but for me it's been a real assessment on what we must continue to do and what we've learned from the process so we can perhaps do differently. Where there are, perhaps report back motions with an expectation of what's gonna come, what we're gonna do with that report back. That there are timelines incorporated into the report back. That while folks have done these studies and these reports, and then they sit. And I, as a new supervisor, I'm like, well, here's a report that all y'all's names are on this, you voted on it. So why are we not doing these things? Okay, so we want to close the jails, let's fund and find a permanent funding source, budget queen, for the Office of Diversion and Reentry beds. There is a pathway, you all did the work. All you have to do is pick one and just do it. So it's been an interesting experience for me. Coming off of 10 years of kind of building slowly, then I had to think back, okay, no, so don't think of your 10th year, think of your first 3 years. You didn't start like you ended, right? So I'm having to, okay, let me pause, be patient, reassess, establish relationship, figure out priorities, so we can keep going. But to hear the history, see new emerging leadership, it does give me faith that, and to be in a room of committed funders, it does give me faith that we're going to get there. I want us to not forget lessons learned and to continue to go deep in our analysis, our understanding of the budget process, and bring additional people on. One thing I'll say for the example with Measure J, and for the funders, we fund and grow up a crop of brilliant leaders. And then it's like, how wonderful, then 2 get plucked and run for public office. the majority leader of the state assembly, and the LA City Councilwoman. So you have to continue to provide the resources so we continue to have a pipeline of people to continue to do the work at all levels so we can play inside outside. From my perspective, because I made the decision 15, 16, 17 years ago to take my skill set and my orientation to affect it from the inside out, to be budget chair, because I saw the budget being weaponized against my people. Okay, then I'm gonna learn that process and flip that. We need people to make that decision. You need folks to decide to run. So we can't be in a position where it's an either or. We have to have people poised to do it all.
Thank you, Supervisor Mitchell, for everything. You know, I think we know why, but we'd love to name why. We're talking about women and femmes leading the way, and why that is. We've talked a little bit about how the groundwork has been laid for some of these victories, but as I hear you all talking, and I hear you talking, Supervisor, about like figuring out what are those special skill sets that we each can have and can identify, and that we can put in and work together in coalition on, and I just continue to hear everybody figure out how to work together. So I think about that, of course, when I think about women and femmes working, because we do work together. No offense, men. But John's my friend. But why is this? Why is it that women and femmes continue to lay this groundwork? And that's for anyone can answer.
Because it's what we do. It's just what we do. And for us, it's just not hard. I've looked at my male colleagues in just utter disdain, my son included, in their inability to get out of their own way, to see beyond, close your ears, John, the imagined length of their own, you know what, to solve for the greater good.
Yes.
It is tragic and fascinating to bear witness. And that is just not our issue. It's just, the goddess just said, well, I got to put somebody in charge. It's just not our issue. And now, let's be clear, I'm very proud to serve on an all-female board of supervisors, and that's very exciting. And we are, elected officials, and that we have to have a different kind of chromosome to run and put yourself out there to do all you have to do to be elected. And we don't all agree all the time. You all see that at board meetings. You all see that when I'm rolling my eyes at one of them. However, it is a very different experience. It's hard for me to even articulate. It is just a very different experience. I think back to what Gloria Molina must have gone through, and I can't even imagine. Both politically, given the leaning of the board then, Gloria Molina, for the non-Angelinos, was our first woman elected to the board, who's also a Latina and a badass. And so, she, has told me stories about, like, they saw her coming, and so, she got extra grief. She got extra grief because of who she was. I can't even imagine what she went through and endured for all of us. We will never know what she endured for all of us. So that's a long, around the way explanation. I don't, maybe somebody else has a real answer, but it's just different for us.
Yes, we have the skills. Yes, we have the historical memory of caregiving and leading within our communities. Organizing. It's part of our DNA, it's part of what we do, it's part of our history. And I think it's important to name the disproportionate impact that the system has on women and femmes. And that because of that impact, we are the most well-positioned to lead on the work. When we just take a look at the numbers, right? Women are the fastest growing incarcerated population in the country. So if we zoom out to the whole country, women are the fastest growing population inside of our prisons and our jails. Of that population, over 30% identify as lesbian, bisexual, or trans. And those numbers are probably on the low end, right? So we're looking at the most gender marginalized disproportionately, right? And then let's look at Los Angeles. During the pandemic, Black women served the longest lengths of stay across race and gender. So it wasn't the men spending the longest lengths of stay inside of our jails, it was Black women. When we look at the disproportionate Black representation inside of our jails, Black folks are overrepresented. 8% of our population, close to 40% of the folks in our jails. But if you look at the K6G unit, that's where queer and trans folks are caged inside of our jail system, that disproportionate rate is even higher, right? And so when we look outside of the jails and prisons, 80% of bail in California is paid for by Black and brown women. They're shouldering the cost. When we look at who is visiting people inside of jail and prison, both for men and women's prisons and jails, it is women. It is mothers.
The commissary fees.
The commissary fees.
Calls.
The phone calls. What is the largest re-entry system in the country? It is Black and brown women. Not working for an organization, not working for a re-entry provider, just in the community taking our folks home, right? And thank God for organizations like Trans Latina Coalition that are doing that work for our communities. But it's women that are creating these organizations to take in our folks. So we are the backbone of the reentry program. I can't tell you how many times I've had to pay bail for a loved one, for a sibling, for my father, had to create housing opportunities, take them to treatment, go to court. My sister went to law school to be able to defend our family, and she was a federal public defender for many years. We are the ones that are putting ourselves on the line and creating those systems of care and reentry. So yeah, hell yeah, we need to be at the front. Hell yeah, we need to be funded, and we should be recognized because so much of this labor is invisible work.
Yes.
Bailey, I want you to talk next, but I just want to add a little bit in because we're going to go to questions after this too. So I'm going to add a little bit of the next question in. And knowing that that is a leadership that is changing the way everything is, if we want to look to an answer to resource cis and trans women and femmes as well, what does that look like as well, and how can that be done? So everybody that is doing the work, and in addition, groups of folks that everybody is not familiar with funding. So how can they make sure that they are resourcing the work as well?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I mean, that's definitely an important question, and it would have been beautiful and amazing if this room was full of people, right? For them to really understand what needs to happen, right? So before I answer that question, I want to say that, femmes have this beautiful spirit of nurturing, and I think it's in our DNA, for us to be caring, right? And for us to, like this motherhood instinct, so to speak, right? And it doesn't matter if it's, biological motherhood or, or adopted motherhood. But we have that gift, and I think what is happening and what has happened historically is that men, right, particularly white men, are scared of our power. That's why they have, for centuries oppressed us, right? Like they want to keep us in the margin. I mean, we still, women are still making less than men, right? And then let's not talk about, women of color, right? And let's not talk about, trans women who are the most poor of any other population, right? And so tying that to your question, right? I'm Bambi Salcedo, right? And I am recognized nationally and internationally, right, for my work, right? But one of the issues that I continue to encounter is access, right? Let me just give you an example. We recently got a loan. We purchased a 21,000 square foot space. And, you know, we're in this fundraising mode, right? Like, our projected budget is $30 million to build this, this amazing state-of-the-art 3-story building that is specifically to uplift the livelihood of transgender and confirming intersex people, right? And although our mission is to, you know, to really support trans Latinx people, yes, that's our focus, but the work that we're doing as an organization, it really is on behalf of all of our people, right? And that's why we're an organization that functions with 2 arms. We believe in the empowerment of our community through service provision, because you can't really organize people and mobilize people if people are struggling with food and housing and all of those things. That's why we have incorporated, you know, we give lunch every day to our people, right? Every day we distribute about 30 to 40 plates. We have clothes, hygiene kits. We go out to the community to do outreach to support them in that way, to let them know that we exist. And we have built a multitude of services, right? And we recently, we haven't gone public because it's also scary, right? But we recently, it's scary to say that you're like a multi-million-dollar organization, right? But we recently got funded by the state of California Department of Healthcare Services with $18 million to build our center. But I still have to raise $10 million. And I've been having conversations with people, right? Like with consultants to help us, you know, fundraise, right? Like in the language that people use, particularly in philanthropy, is capital campaign, right? And we're not calling it that. We're doing an empowerment campaign because this is to empower our people, right? And so we need to shift our language, you know, so that's one thing. But what I was getting at is the conversations that I have been having with several consultants that could help us fundraise. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do a feasibility study, and we're gonna interview your board, and we're gonna, assess your donor base, right? Well, guess what? Our board are trans women, right? And we don't ask them to fundraise because, you know, they're trying to survive, right? And our donor, guess who our donors are? Our people. Bambi Salcedo, like I don't know millionaires. You know, like if we compare ourselves to the LGBT Center, for instance, right? Yeah. They know people who, like, they'll give them millions of dollars. So they'll give them $100,000 for, you know, like nothing, right? And even me, who is recognized nationally and internationally, I don't have access. We've been lucky that, you know, there are a few foundations who have seen our work, have seen what we do, but there's so much money in philanthropy that I don't even have access to, you know, and just to I'll give you another example, right? Like for years, and we're lucky that now the Ford Foundation is it's gonna start to fund us, but for years I was trying to get in the door with the Ford Foundation until I finally there was someone, right? A Femme, a Black Femme, who said, like, I want to learn more about what you're doing. And that's how we're getting some support, right? Like, I think I know that all of this is about relationships, right? Like, and about who you know. And I don't know a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know, so that's why that's why I said, like, I think it's important for us to recognize our power, right? Like in our access, like who do we know and who do we can introduce, right? Because I know that that's how philanthropy works, right? Like, please introduce me to someone, to people, because I need to raise $10 million and I don't know what I do.
And if I could just add, I mean, the reports that Philanthropy has produced for decades
4
talk
cents
about
$100 for trans people.
exactly, and for women of color led organizations, it is harder for women and women of color elected officials. We don't get the same donations that my male counterparts do.
Yep.
And so they like to say it's because you don't ask, Bam, you could open the door, Bam, you could ask for money. Give us access. I'm not scared to ask for money, but there's this notion. And so we're saddled with that misconceived notion. We'll look to our organizations, we'll come to our organizations for the photo op, we'll point to our organizations for the most ethical, most efficiently run, blah, blah, blah. But then it's that other piece, and you're absolutely right.
It's access.
It's access.
And just so you know, there's 42 of us that work at our organization. So we officially have become the biggest translator organization in the world. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I would want to respond to out of what has been said. I mean, this is incredible. I feel like the Women in Femmes piece hits in a lot of ways for me. Just at the very cellular level for me, doing JusticeLA communications, I don't have a team. Like, when you see these placements for op-eds, when you see, a spokesperson from one of our partner orgs like the ACLU or Vera Institute, like, that's just me with my laptop at home. And so the infrastructure is not being funded for that narrative work, for that sustained push, like Bambi mentioned. We just had a significant win working with the legal team to, accomplish some form of zero bail here in Los Angeles County. And then we have so much misinformation that is making the headlines. They're doing, 7 hours a day of it on, every broadcast news service. And like I said, it's just me with my laptop. So I can only place so many spokespeople. I can only do so much social media management, JusticeLA, Dignity and Power Now. I can only do so much. And that funding, the other side, they have all of that. Yeah. They have so much funding to replay the same 2 clips of quote unquote smash and grabs for 10 hours a day. So on a very cellular level, as far as how can women of color be more well-resourced, raising my hand here. But then also when I look at the families that I'm working with on a daily basis, for a lot of Black women, one of the things we do with our partner organizations, SE and the Bail Project, is Black Mama's Bailout for Mother's Day. A lot of these bail amounts are $200. It's nothing. It really is these really low amounts that make a huge difference for our community. I don't think that there's enough mutual aid being funded. And it has a very cascading effect on our population when women and femmes are impacted by these issues. We have a mother who went through our formerly incarcerated program, Forever Rooted at DPN, Robin Williams, and she was in and out of incarceration for over a decade. And as I got to know her, I found out how much the ODR program helped her, which Holly Mitchell helped secure that funding. She named herself the budget queen.
I lost my front teeth trying to get it done.
And it was so hard, and we supported that effort. We're so lucky to have Supervisor Mitchell to champion that, but ODR really changed her life, and I got to meet her daughters, her grandchildren, who were all affected by her having that one opportunity of going through the program, the Office of Diversion and Reentry. It affected so many lives for her to receive that resource. So women and femmes receiving those resources affects the entire world, the entire families that they take care of. Being incarcerated for 1 week means those children aren't getting dropped off to school. That's right. It means that there's no income coming to the house, meals being served. It means so much for women and femmes to be supported in our communities, and it really doesn't take much. I'm talking about people who are like, $200 behind on their rent. Like, it really does not take much to have a huge impact on women and femmes and the families that they lead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go to Supervisor Mitchell, and then I'm gonna go to like maybe one or two questions before we close out.
I just don't want to lose the comment you made, and I was reminded, today's LA Times, front page of the calendar section, the sister who stepped down from her DEI job at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts. And it's a first person story. And we can't let you try to manage all that stuff by yourself because you can't. And so then we burn out or we get sick. And so her opening paragraph of the article is a conversation with her gynecologist, which led to her leaving her job. So when I heard you say that, it is ridiculous for us to assume that you can fight Goliath that way. You can't. And so I wanted to take the opportunity for the funders to understand that we have to fund on par with the opposition if we're going to expect to win.
Oh, just to add one thing, we have to fund the capacity, we also have to fund the health and wellness. So many of us are doing this work while also being directly impacted by these systems, right? So we're expected to be at the Board of Supervisors, giving testimony, going home and having to contend with our family member who has a mental health crisis. Or be the one that the community comes to when there's a domestic violence dispute because we know the resources, we know who to call in the county, we know what to do. And so that's a lot for us to hold. It's a lot to carry, it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Every day.
I also want to add, because this is super important, but it's doable. It's doable that we can take care of our people, right? And I'm going to give an example. We are a trans-led organization, and we have adopted a sabbatical for all of our employees. Every last Friday of the month, we have our staff meeting. And the first Monday of the month, we also adopted for people to have, a self-care day, right? And so, anyways, I'm saying that because also, like, some of our employees are coming to their 6th year, and so they're gonna need a sabbatical for 2 months. And then, after 10 years, they get a 3 month, but, we need money for that too, right? And so, sabbatical should not just be for executives. Like, all of us do the work, right? Like, it's a collective work that we do. And so, I also want to say that, unfortunately, some of the donors that foundations do have are also the same donors that are funding the other side.
That part.
And so, I think we have to also think about, like, and we know that all money is dirty money, right? But we have to think about, like, who aligns with the values, right? And so I just wanted to throw it out there because it's the reality. And it's part of the hypocrisy that we're living.
Does anyone have any questions? Please introduce, oh, hi Victoria. Please introduce yourself and then say your question. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. My name is Anuja Medidata with the Race, Gender, and Human Rights Fund, and we support cis and trans women's leadership in the movement for justice in California. And so heartened to hear all this work and deep bow to all of you and your comrades. And I would really love to hear if you could say a few words about what were the elements of the organizing strategy? What was the secret sauce? Because this was a huge lift. It took multiple years. And what were some of those pieces that enabled you to achieve this? That's my question. And then my comment is, how can we amplify this as a kind of, you were saying that, you share with other locations like Detroit and Atlanta and other places, but how can we amplify this as a story that needs to be told more broadly than this room?
Someone gets 60 seconds.
I'll be really quick. So some of the things that I talked about earlier is creating a diverse space that focuses on intersectional issues. So gender justice, public health, racial justice, environmental justice, being able to really see that intersectionality in the work was critical. The other piece is mobilizing credible messengers, and that's where mobilizing our healthcare workers, ER doctors, nurses, to be saying the same thing we're saying in a board setting was also really critical. The other piece was the culture organizing, the creative work, and not losing losing ourselves to all the policy work when the culture work is equally important to really change hearts and minds. So, and then the last piece I would say, having a strong inside and outside strategy. So tapping into our relational organizing skills to be able to build with like-minded folks inside of these houses of power, right? And then moving folks that are on the fence, right? And it was a lot of us, I'll say Eunisses and I, pinning Judge Espinoza in a corner saying, you need to speak up more. We need to amplify your work. And him like, oh no, he was the head of ODR, the Office of Diversion and Reentry at the time. It's like, I don't know, I can't really say much. Like, oh, I have to do my work quietly. And then by the end of it, he's rocking his ponytail, showing me his tattoos. Like, so really like working folks and like building that human connection with folks to move them to our side.
And be radical.
Hey y'all, Victoria Cepeda Mojarro, Sugar AF from Groundswell Fund. We find women of color, trans folks of color, and working class women of color in mostly our way, but intersection work. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm Los Angeles native, so very proud to see these amazing humans up here. My question today is in two-part in a very thunder fashion. A, how are you taking care of yourselves? And B, who are you training so that you can rest and we have more fabulous women on stage?
Well, I'm kicking ass because I encourage women to run for office who are on my staff. Case in point, the one who's texting me right now, Congresswoman Sydney Camlaga, who was telling me if one more of these MFs tries to be speaker, I'm gonna lose my mind. And there's an ongoing mentoring relationship. So, we don't just prop them up and let them fly away. There's support. Sonia Lopez, who came to work for me right out of undergrad when I was in the assembly, who's still with me, who's the youngest Latina chair of the Compton Community College District and helped lead that district out of receivership. I have worked directly and been successful in replacing myself with women, Black women, the Assembly and the Senate, and being very comfortable and public about that. And supporting, I'm a member of the board of every Women of Color Run for Office, Please organization across the country, Higher Heights, all of them. And I am taking care of myself because I had breakfast with Gloria Molina last summer. Breakfast that led into the lunch hour, we talked so long. And she said some very powerful, personal, profound things to me. And I have made a decision about what I'm not gonna let this job do to me. Yeah. I have made a conscious decision. And it was coupled with watching my mother, who was a unicorn in the field of corrections as a Black woman many years ago. And I watched what fighting every day, what she allowed, because we have to own it, do to her physically. And she carried excess weight and died earlier than she should have. And so I am making the conscious decision every day that I am not gonna allow whatever it is, the job, the pressure, whatever, do those things to me. There are examples of elected officials, we all have them in our mind, that I am making a conscious decision not to be like that. I'm not gonna be 80 in elected office. So when people hear me say publicly, this is the last public office I will hold, oh no, Holly, you have to run for governor. Actually, I don't.
I've tried this a number of times with Holly.
Yeah, I really don't. I appreciate that, I'm flattered. The US Senate list, I'm so flattered, Governor, thank you, but no. I'm not doing that. If I'm reelected next year, and if I get elected another term, I'll be 67, 68, that's plenty. Now, cause I'm a woman of color, I'm gonna have to work someplace, cause I'm not gonna have the money, but I'm not running for office. So I think that sometimes we have to do the self-talk about what we are not going to allow to happen to us.
Yes.
So important, because a lot of
I
our.
will briefly time check us because they are gonna shut us down in 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
So this was a great ending question, Victoria.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot in La Defensa is how do we undo the influence of capitalism in terms of how we organize. And so some of the ways that we take care of each other in La Defensa, Bambi mentioned a sabbatical. We have a month-long sabbatical as an organization every year. Everybody is on sabbatical. We have a spring break, we have a summer break, we have a fall break. All of them are a week long. We have flexible days that do not count towards your paid time off every month, because I have my cycle. It is painful, maybe a little TMI, but it is so difficult to even move in certain times of the month because of just ongoing chronic pain. And I know a lot of our team has ongoing chronic pain, and it just eats at your sick time, your paid time off. So we're like, no, let's just add 3 flexible days every month. And now we recently we piloted over the summer, we implemented a 32-hour work week. Everybody loved it. No, the work got done. Everybody's happier. Everybody's happy on morning meetings on Mondays. Like, who would have thought?
Not us.
But it makes a huge difference for our sustainability. And so that's both how I take care of myself, how I take care of my team, and how we're investing in our team's longevity. Because we are a new organization. We were founded in 2019. Eunisses and I founded it. La Defensa. We are C3, a C4, and a PAC. We built a PAC in a month. We decided to run a slate of judicial candidates and recruited them like that, and we got the first woman public defender elected to the LA County Superior Court last year. And we're about to run another slate of judges. So we are on it, and yet we are working as hard as we're resting. Yeah. And how we're building the pipeline, I'm proud to say that 2 of our team members, and I was sharing with folks earlier, most of our team is in their early and mid-20s. I'm the oldest, I'm 38, and I'm the executive director, so we are a very young team. And 2 of our team members just graduated from the Solis Policy Institute program, the local program, and then another crop of our team, we're a team of 13 now, are applying for the next round. And so Eunisses and I started there, Diana Zuniga before us, Emily Harris before us. Like, we have just been moving all of the women that we're organizing through these amazing programs. So thank you. Thank you for your leadership. And just fun fact, the first state policy that I worked on was the RISE Act, the largest sentencing reform act in California state history, and that was with Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and it left an impact on me, so thank you.
Beautiful.
It's 4:59. Can you do 15 seconds real quick? Does anybody want to say anything to the funders in this room before we get up and leave?
I think we can take a
I
minute.
think you got it? You guys got it?
We can take a minute more.
Oh, we've got a minute?
Yeah, I think so.
Got it.
So before Catalina leaves, I want for you to know who Catalina is.
Wait, Catalina.
So I wanna say that what has helped me to sustain myself and what feeds my soul is when I see amazing and beautiful trans women who I've known for years. I've known young people from like 15, they're now like 35. But Catalina is an executive director in Washington from, I don't remember the organization, but this I just learned.
The Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network.
The Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. But this is what feeds my soul, and I have adopted in my own personal life to take time off twice a year, in the middle of the year and at the end of the year. And I seclude myself, I get together with my own power, my higher power, and I write and I heal, and then I come back. I drink water. The first thing that I do before I do anything else, I drink water, and as I'm drinking water, I'm asking my higher power to cleanse my thoughts, to cleanse my words, to help me through the day. So that, it's an everyday thing. So that's, I do that. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Can you share anything?
Yeah, I will say that holding these relationships, because Dignity and Power Now specifically is very close to, and just me personally, very close to the families. You know, this is an emergency for us, and we're at a record number of deaths in custody this year. And so that's what keeps me going, quite honestly, is that we can't wait. We need this power building, we need this funding now. And we need the support for our families yesterday, 2 years ago is when we need it. And I definitely want to be still working towards implementing a lot of the things that folks said here. But I will say that that is top of mind for me. Like, there's very real faces and names when I wake up in the morning.
All right, we'll look for everybody in here. Make sure you take the cards of these lovely leaders or give them yours so that you can make sure that you help give the support to them that they need. I told you guys what I do. We're happy to help you figure out how to do that too, because we would love for friends to continue to come to this kind of leadership that is building the power, that's making a change in the region and in the state and setting standard with the rest of the country. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to all of you for being here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Round of applause for our speakers.